loud truck. I don't have a stand. I truly just lift my window up and that's how I'm filming. It's a do-it-yourself model over here. Hey everyone, if you don't know me, my name is Michaela, but you can call me Mick, and welcome back to my channel where we dive a little bit deeper. In my previous video, I talked all about my new process for creating characters before I start writing a book. This process is now severely shorter than it used to be in the past. I really just make sure I'm creating the look for the character, their wants, needs, and false belief. I understand how they relate to other characters in the story, and then I throw them in some different situation, like everyone goes into a coffee shop and we see what happens. Today's video, I'm diving deeper into the idea of characterization and craft, and still we're only skimming the surface. But before we dive deeper, I want to remind you that a lot of the complex character creation and relationship building that you see or even hear about in this video is going to come with rewriting. I know, probably not what you wanted to hear. But the truth is that a lot of story structure and all these writing craft concepts like voice and character arcs, etc., are going to come in the rewriting and editing phase. Even if you create a master outline like I did for Project House of Stone, that will change. And I will only truly perfect the pacing and the story structure in the rewrites, because there is most likely going to be multiple drafts before it's even publishing ready. So I just want to remind you guys that if you are a new writer, like you've never written anything before, you're just starting out, this is your first project, you do not need to know all of this at the beginning. You also don't need to write perfectly at the beginning. I just want to remind all of us, I need the reminder too. So you will not need to know all of this before you start writing. But I do think that it's fun, at least I think it's fun, to study writing craft and really understand it and start to try to use it in your own writing, even if it comes with time and rewrites. So everything that I'm talking about today is all going to be stuff that I will look in depth after I'm done with the zero draft. Like, I just need to get this story out, and then I'll come back and look at how I can write really complex characters. In today's video, I'm going to talk about characterization, so deepening your character creation. I'm going to be talking about the types of character arcs, the outcomes of character arcs, and some examples of character arcs using the Six of Crows characters. I used a lot of resources for this video. They will be down in the description, and I talk about them as we go along. Some of the main resources I used are some textbooks that I got from my creative writing classes. So The Making of a Story by LaPlante, The Complete, what does that say? Handbook of Novel Writing by a ton of people. This is just essays after essays about everything you need to know. These are my Bibles. I live by them. I also use Studio Binder today as a great resource, as well as my own creative writing degree, because I need to put all of that information somewhere, right? So today is going to be a longer video and not like my shorter writing updates that will also be happening weekly. So since this is a longer video, go ahead and grab a cozy drink. For me, that's water because it's the middle of the day, but maybe you want to grab some tea, some coffee, some poppy soda. That's my favorite. And if you're like me and you are a big note taker, then you might want to grab something to take notes with as well. I'm so grateful to have you guys watching this video, and as always, if you aren't subscribed, what are you doing? I mean, a subscribe doesn't hurt no one but me. I'm kidding, but if you do like this video, please go ahead and subscribe. It's truly helpful, and I am appreciative of every single one of you that subscribes to my channel. If you like this character creation video, then go ahead and give a thumbs up. That is literally just a click of the button, and it's so helpful for the YouTube gods and the algorithms for people finding these videos. And as always, I'd love to have you comment down below. I love talking about your guys' writing projects, like truly in the comments. So please keep commenting. I love discussing what you guys have going on. It feels like we're just creating this cute little writing community in the YouTube comments. So without further ado, let's get started and head to my screen. In episode 3 of my Let's Write a Book series, I talk about how the main part of my character creation process is coming up with the wants, needs, and the false belief that every character holds. These are still essential to any story and are needed for the creation of the character arc. But before we jump into arcs, I wanted to talk about, in general, just how do we even create complex and believable characters? In The Making of a Story by LaPlante, there are 4 different pillars to creating a complex and believable character. First is what the character looks like. 2 is what the character says. 3 is what the character does, or how they act. And 4 is what the character thinks or feels. I'm going to quickly go over these 4 pillars of characterization that can help you create a more complex and believable character. What the character looks like. This is one of the most basic ways to get the reader to know who your character is, but it is often an overlooked step or just not looked into deeper. Defining what the character looks like is more than just defining their hair color, their eye color, or their race, which a lot of authors do as the basic character description. Instead, it's other things like the shape of their body, what clothes they wear, how they even carry themselves in a room. And you can also go as far to say what their environment looks like. All of these can make up what a character looks like and allows for the reader to envision them. The Making of a Story by LaPlante was, for lack of a better word, a textbook I used for one of my college writing classes, and where a lot of this information is being pulled from for this section. In this, they use an example from A Small Good Thing by Raymond Carver, which is a short story. And if you don't know, short stories are amazing tools to study writing, since you can consume a lot of them quickly, and because they are much harder to write, I think, than full-length novels. They're just a great place to study pacing, characterization, voice, style, etc. Literally anything in just a shorter, contained place. You have to do so much with such little words, and this short story by Raymond Carver is only 5,000 words. And that's like a chapter and a half, since most chapters are around 2,000 or 3,000 words each. So within this short story, there is a short paragraph that describes one of the characters in such a unique way. So let's take a look. The doctor was a handsome, big-shouldered man with a tanned face. He wore a 3-piece blue suit, a striped tie, and ivory cufflinks. His gray hair was combed along the sides of his head, and he looked as if he had just come from a concert. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. So let's first take a look at this first sentence. The doctor was a handsome, big-shouldered man with a tanned face. This is a great and unique take, I think, on the basic character descriptions. So first, we are calling the doctor handsome, which already has some big weight to it. This means that this person is stereotypically good looking, and whatever that means to you as the reader. We also understand that he is a big-shouldered man. This means that he is a wide guy, which also means that we could probably assume that he is tall, also with a tanned face. So this is giving some allusion to this man's race, most likely a white character who does have a tan. Carver also talks about his hair color here, saying his gray hair was combed along the sides of his head. This is just a very specific image of how his hair is sitting. Even as I was actually typing this out, I almost wanted to say that his hair was combed back, you know? like a typical comb over. And I didn't realize that that's not what was going on. No. He's saying that it was combed along the side of his head, meaning he most likely has, look at how horrible. This looks like the scary like spider creature from Toy Story, but this actually means that even though he has gray hair, it's combed along the sides. I'm picturing now more of a fuller hair than a balding man who's combing it back. So those are some of our big descriptors, our visualizations that a lot of people typically use when describing a character. We also have what he's wearing. So he wore a 3-piece blue suit, a striped tie, and ivory cufflinks. This also says a lot without saying too much. A 3-piece blue suit is a pretty big deal. A 3-piece suit is very fancy. What else is fancy is ivory cufflinks. What this screams to me is money. This guy either has wealth or he's trying to look as if he has wealth. We could have already assumed that he is very wealthy because he's already being introduced as a doctor, which stereotypically means that he most likely has money. This man is stereotypically good looking. He's broad-shouldered, most likely tall, gray hair, and it's a full head of hair. Oh, and I forgot that it also says that he is tanned. And why I'm saying we are probably assuming here that he is a white man with a tan is because Carver very specifically uses the word tanned face. He's not saying tan face, which could be used, not a great descriptor, but could be used as a descriptor for the color of someone's skin. But instead, he is making it clear that this guy has a tan where normally there wouldn't be one. And what we can probably assume from him having a tanned face is he could go on vacation a lot, which also signifies some sort of wealth here. And then we have that he dresses well and he is well off. So we're getting a lot literally just from 2.5 sentences. But the last sentence is, I think, the most important and one to really pay attention to. And he looked as if he had just come from a concert. These are the types of character descriptions that I think are overlooked and not often used. This is such a great way to really understand the presence of the doctor. How he is entering the room changes our perception of the character, which is super important for this character description. This is how the author is describing his presence. Think of how you would look if you had just come from a concert. I know that when I am coming from a concert, I am a little bit sweaty, a little bit more disheveled. Is that how you just spell disheveled? No, it is not. Okay, only one S. I should know that, but I don't. He also could have like a wilder look in his eye. So even though his hair is combed back on both sides and that's well put together, he's a little bit off. His presence is a little bit off. Maybe he's even looking a little exhausted. There's a lot of things that we can take away from that. And what I love about this description and why I just had to put it in as my own example as well is because it's such a disconnect from what we get here. It doesn't really fit. And now I have a more clear image of how this doctor looks after we got this last sentence. Okay, so I'm going to give some homework, and I know maybe I shouldn't call it homework. Maybe I should just be like an exercise. I want you to try to do this for your own characters. So try to describe them in only 3 to 4 sentences like we just saw here, and make sure to include what they look like, but also try to have a sentence that shows instead of tells, like the concert sentence. The second pillar is what the character says. Ah, yes, dialogue. I gotta admit, I honestly hate dialogue. And it's probably the reason I leaned so hard into writing novels instead of screenwriting in college. Dialogue definitely takes me a couple passes before I completely get it right. In the beginning, all my characters pretty much sound the exact same, and after a couple edits, they will all hopefully have their own voice and their own cadence, and all their dialogue will look and sound a little bit different, and that is what makes it believable. It's not just what the character says, it is also how the character says it. Thinking about how the character speaks, this is focusing on things like vocabulary, any slang words they might use. Look at that horrible writing, I'm sorry. Also, the syntax that they have, which, if you don't know, the syntax is the arrangement of words in a sentence. This is the most basic way I can describe it. You can also think about if they misuse words. You know, do they use a word incorrectly or correctly in a sentence? There's so many different ways to show the how a character speaks to identify the voice of the character and say a lot more about this character. There's also a clever use of subtext that you can use to create more characterization. This is something that we do every single day subconsciously. The subtext is that deeper meaning behind what we're saying, kind of like a big iceberg. If this is all that's being shown to us, which is the sentence or the words that we're saying, but actually there's so much more behind those words and what is actually meant deeper under the surface. So what is not being said by your character even as they're speaking? This is a very short scene from The Secret History by Donna Tartt. We have two characters speaking here, which is Richard, our main character, who I'm gonna highlight in yellow, and then we have Henry, who I will highlight in green. So let's take a look at this. I'm gonna quickly set the scene for you. Here is what happened. Our main character, Richard, went out to eat with another one of the main characters, and his name is Bunny. Bunny is super rich, like most of the characters in A Secret History. Our main character, Richard, is absolutely not rich. After they went out to eat and they were drinking a ton, they ran up the bill to a lot of money. Bunny pretended as if his wallet was at home and he couldn't pay, forcing Richard to pay. Richard did not have enough money to cover the bill and actually had to call up Henry to come save the day and foot the bill. So this is that conversation after that scenario happened. Richard says, "Oh no, please," I said, embarrassed. "Just a mix-up. I'll pay you back." He ran a hand through his hair and I was surprised to see it was trembling. "I wouldn't dream of such a thing," he said curtly. "It's his fault." "But he told you he was taking you out, didn't he?" His voice had a slightly accusatory note. "Well, yes," I said. "And just happened to leave his wallet at home?" "It's all right." "It's not all right," Henry snapped. "It's a terrible trick. How are you to know? He takes it on faith that whoever he's with can produce tremendous sums at a moment's notice. He never thinks about these things, you know, how awkward it is for everyone. Besides, what if I hadn't been at home?" That was a typo. I'm sure he really just forgot. So what can we learn from this scene? Why I picked this scene, and I honestly just flipped to a random page in The Secret History. Richard uses plain language, whereas Henry uses fuller sentences and different vocabulary. So a good example of this is right here when Richard says, "Just a mix-up, I'll pay you back." So these are shorter sentences, quick and to the point. He also doesn't have a full sentence here. He doesn't say, "It was just a mix-up." He goes, "Just a mix-up," which shows he's speaking more casually, as compared to how Henry speaks afterwards, which he is saying, "I wouldn't dream of such a thing. It's his fault." Now, "I wouldn't dream of such a thing" is not what I would have ever said in a situation like this. Like if my friend needed me to bail them out and they said, "I'll pay you back," I would say something like, "Oh no, don't worry about it." right? Something more casual. But the fact that he didn't respond casually, instead, he responded in a full sentence that not a lot of people would say, right? This creates Henry's character. Also, you can tell that he is being curt because that second sentence is short and punctuated. It's his fault. We also actually see some really great subtext happening here that our author is actually showing with an action. So he ran a hand through his hair and our narrator was surprised to see that it was trembling. This allows us to know how Henry is feeling as he's speaking, but Henry's words aren't matching it, right? So this creates that iceberg, that subtext for Henry's next sentence, because Henry's hand is trembling, meaning he is angry, right? But he answers so politely. You know, I wouldn't dream of such a thing. That feels like a don't worry about it, even though he's angry. We can also see that he's angry in our narrator picking this up by saying that his voice had a slightly accusatory note. So this is the moment that our narrator is now picking up on the anger in Henry's question. And also, Henry decides to emphasize the and just happened to leave his wallet at home. This is a great use of emphasizing someone's words and how it can change the meaning of a sentence. His anger level is starting to rise as this paragraph goes off, because right here is when he snaps. He's kind of building that up. First, his hand is trembling. He's trying to act like it's cool. And then he's being a little bit more accusatory with his sentence. And now he's emphasizing and just happened to leave his wallet at home. Like, are you kidding me, Richard? Are you an idiot? Right? That's really what he's saying. That is the subtext for the just happened. Okay, there's some big subtext here. He's kind of being like, Richard, why didn't you see this coming? And are you stupid? And then he finally snaps. His language that Henry says here is so different from Richard. Richard keeps using plain language. Well, yes, it's all right. But then Henry snaps saying it's not all right. It's a terrible trick. How are you to know? So this also confirms this subtext right here. This confirms that Henry thinks, yes, Richard, you are an idiot. How are you to know? You were a fool. You were blind. You didn't see this coming. But then the next sentence is so telling to Henry's character, right? He says, he takes it on faith that whoever he's with can produce tremendous sums at a moment's notice. That is quite a big sentence. Let's think of how I would say that sentence. If I was speaking to a friend, it definitely would not be that, right? It would be something a little bit more casual, like, how are you to know? Bunny always thinks everyone has the same amount of money as him. That is the casual way to say that, and that's probably something that Richard would say. But since Henry is kind of this hoity-toity, elevated, well-off guy, like all of the people really in this book except for Richard, he says he takes it on faith. Okay, that's Bunny always thinks. That whoever he's with can produce tremendous sums at a moment's notice. That everyone has the same amount of money as him. So do you see how even just this small little section that I literally took from a random page, you can really start to break down the dialogue and really understand who these characters are in this short snippet. Okay, so let's do another exercise. Well, you don't have to. I'm just trying to give you guys something to do if you want to dive into this more after this YouTube video. So my suggestion for this is to either use a book you're currently reading or go and grab your absolute favorite book and just flip to a scene with dialogue. And then make notes just as we did here. So make notes about, are they using specific vocabulary? What does that vocabulary say about the character, just as we did with Henry's, hoity-toity sentence? How are the two voices different? Richard was speaking plainly. Henry was using full sentences and different vocab words. How does the author show that? And then, is there any subtext to unpack? There were two moments of subtext 1, Henry was angry and trying not to show that when he was speaking. And then 2, Henry wasn't blaming Richard because he basically just thought Richard was an idiot, which was what Henry was saying without actually saying it. So outside of what the character is saying, how our characters act both alone and in responses to actions happening to them or them performing an action, as well as how they act in relation to others, tell us more about our character, I think, than anything else. That's why before I write a story, I like to do that alternate universe scene that I talked about in my last video. I really love to place my characters all together in a completely different scenario from what my book is about. An example of this is putting them all into a coffee shop, or my personal favorite, of sending them to Disney World. Making sure you understand how your character would react in different situations is key. Also important to understand how your character interacts with others around them. So how are their relationships? They definitely aren't going to treat every single person the same. Just think about it in your own life. Do you treat every single person the same? Are they nervous talking to some people? Maybe they're snippy with someone because they're jealous or they're condescending. Whatever it is, it can be helpful to do some writing exercises to throw all your characters, no matter who they are, into the same situation just to see how they act and how they interact with others. My exercise is similar to what I suggested in my own character creation process video. Try to do this yourself. Write an AU scene with your characters and send them to Disney World or the coffee shop. But in Disney World, why I love it and why it's really my favorite AU scene to do, and no, not just because I did the Disney College program, it just has so many possibilities. I love thinking about who planned this crazy trip with all of these people. Who is the biggest fan and who ends up buying all the merch? Who hates lines? Who hates rides? And who keeps buying Mickey pretzels? Right? I mean, someone's got to do it. Someone in the group has got to be looking for the snack at all times. I just encourage you to do this and see what happens. The fourth pillar is really going to be an extension of our third pillar. And it's what the character thinks or feels. So this is similar to how your characters will act in different situations, but this is how we as authors are expressing how they think or feel in these situations. So the difference is how we act is shown on the outside of us. What do we do physically? Even what do we say verbally to everyone around us? How are we responding externally to the environment or situations happening to us? Instead, for thinking and feeling, this is what's going on internally. So this is everything happening in their head. This is very helpful, obviously, if you have a first person POV or a close third person as well. So if someone goes to Disney World and they hate lines, what are some things, and I mean lines in a ride, right, that you don't want to be in, I hate waiting. So if your character hates waiting in lines because they're impatient, they hate Disney, they feel like they're dragged there, whatever their reasoning is, how would they act externally in a line? They could be sighing, they could be sitting on the ground, they could be checking watches, they could even be audibly saying, I hate this. Whatever it is, however they act externally is how the character reacts to a situation. Thinking and feeling is internally. So if they're sighing, sitting on the ground, checking their watch, saying, I hate this, internally, we are getting to really understand the why behind their actions. So why do they hate to wait? Did something happen that makes them hate to wait? Are they just inherently an impatient person? Their thoughts can really tell us the why and tells us more about who they are as a person. Seeing someone sigh or check their watch is one thing, but also having someone think that this is an absolute waste of their time and they don't like being around any of these people says a completely different story. And how someone thinks or feels within a scene is called interiority. I believe I've said this in another one of my videos, but it is an important concept when we're thinking about characterization. And a great person to explain what interiority is and why it's important is Savannah Gilbo, who is the host of the Fiction Writing Made Easy podcast and a fantastic developmental editor. She says that interiority is rooted in a character's perspective, and no two people's psyches are the same. Everyone experiences emotions in a different way, and everyone has their own unique worldview, values, priorities, hopes, fears, and biases that come into play when processing the world around us. So for example, your angry might look very different from my angry, and it might be caused by very different things. And not only that, but there are many shades of anger and thousands of different reasons why someone could be angry, or whatever emotion you're working with, right? She really breaks it down here, and I just love this quote, so I just felt like I had to use it in this video. No two characters will feel or think the same. This is so important. I think this is the basis for characterization. So maybe you have two characters who hate waiting. Well, they may act the same on the outside, but they are always going to be thinking different things on the inside. No two angries are the same. They're going to look very different. Impatience is going to look very different. It is our job as an author to take our reader into our characters' psyches. I have another exercise for this. Pick up your favorite book once more and flip through and find a scene. So pick one character to look at first and answer these questions. How are they reacting in this scene? How do they feel about what is happening? And what are they thinking? See if you can figure all of that out just in the scene that you picked. Also, be sure to note how the author is describing these things. That is the key here. This is the key to not only characterization, but also your author voice. How are they really describing their characters? Now that we understand the basic pillars of characterization, let's jump into character arcs. Character arcs are an interesting topic in the writing world. First off, everyone seems to have different ideas of how many character arcs there actually are. I just took a screenshot of a couple different headlines when I Googled character arcs, and literally these were all in a row. Like I'm not making this up. I couldn't make it up if I tried. So Screencraft says there are 3 types. Helping Writers Become Authors says 5 types. Then 4 types, and then a long list. Whatever the heck that means. This is 101. What does that mean? What does that actually mean? I don't know. In my opinion, and like most writing advice, I always want to remind you that a lot of it is opinion-based. Some is science-backed, yes, some is widely accepted by the writing community, but in general, it's still all pretty much an opinion. I think that it can be boiled down to 2 different types of arcs. All of them are pretty much saying the same thing. First, we have a positive arc and a negative arc. Some other people like to say that there is a flat character arc. So instead of these little like arc things that we have, this character just kind of stays stagnant, or they might go through ups and downs, but they eventually are stagnant. I don't love the idea of the flat character arc though, which is why I'm not really going to talk about it today. I feel like these best work in movies, and I don't think they work as well in novels. So a flat character arc means that they are unchanged in the story, right? If they're starting in the same place and they're pretty much ending in the same place, even though they go through all these ups and downs. Instead of changing, that means that our character is pretty much just used as the vehicle to tell the story. They're just kind of getting moved around wherever the author wants them to go. And I think a lot of authors can accidentally do this. Really just think about the last time you loved a ton of characters from the book, like every side character was unique and funny and so cool, and the main character just kind of fell flat. Yeah, that is what is happening here. This is most likely then a flat character arc. I personally just don't love it, which is why I'm not even gonna talk about it. I don't think it should be a thing in writing, to be honest. Screencraft.com says that a positive character arc is where a protagonist faces some kind of conflict, learns an important lesson, changes for the better, and overcomes an internal or external flaw. And the overcoming is the key. Positive character arcs are distinguished by some kind of victory or favorable growth. This is just all boiled down to a positive change for our character. A negative character arc, also in the words of Screencraft, is negative character arcs are set apart by one thing: failure. Protagonists in these stories ultimately do not succeed for what they set out to do. Instead, by the end, they are worse off than when they started, so the change or growth that has occurred to or within them is usually inherently negative. Sometimes characters with negative arcs descend into evil, they might become corrupted, or fall victim to flaws of their own personality. So we see the difference here. A positive arc is a positive change. They're going to learn some kind of lesson or have some sort of victory. Whereas a negative arc is going to result in some sort of failure that changes them for the worse and not the better. So like I said, there are positive and negative arcs that happen where either someone ends up better than they were before or worse off than they were before. But I like to look at these character arcs as if there are 4 different outcomes. There are 2 possibilities that can seemingly be positive, and then there are 2 possibilities that can seemingly be negative. I really like using Studio Binder's method for character arcs because I just think it breaks it down very nicely. So that is the resources that I'm using. It's a resource that I've pretty much always used. Let's go through these 4 different outcomes of character arc. I like this method because it really talks about that want and that need that I use when I create my characters. So this is broken down into 4 different quadrants. Above is our positive arcs and their outcomes. And below is their negative arcs and outcomes. And we're gonna see why. So if your character's want was achieved and their need was achieved, that means they have a sweet ending. So they achieved both what they want and what they subconsciously needed, which means they are ending up way higher than they were before the book. You know, they learned that life lesson, they achieved their goals, and they got over that false belief and ultimately got what they needed. Now, if their want failed, so this is also like another really word for that goal. You know, what are they trying to achieve? What do they want in life? And then their need, which again is what their false belief is preventing them from getting. But their need is achieved, right? So their want or their goal failed, but they still got what they really subconsciously needed at the end of the day. They may have not ended up as high because they failed at their goal, but they ultimately succeeded in what they really needed to learn that life lesson. So these are still both positive outcomes. For the negative outcomes, you might have a want achieved. So that means their goal was completed. What they really needed in life was not completed. This, I feel like, leaves someone kind of either here, I guess at the end, or here, depending on how you look at a bittersweet ending. I really think it's more here because yes, someone might have achieved their goal, but they feel dissatisfied. They're probably still upset in some way because they didn't really get what they actually needed to feel fulfilled or to feel loved or, to have a full positive effect. And then a bitter ending is pretty obvious. They don't get what they want or what they need, which is very much a negative ending. And usually this makes our character worse off than they were before. So not just feeling worse off, but like actually worse off as in probably a completely different person or a worse person than they were at the beginning of the story. I'm actually going to use the characters of Six of Crows to showcase these different character arcs. So if you haven't read the book yet, this is spoiler city and I am very, very sorry. So let's take a look at Kaz Brecker. Kaz Brecker is our main character for Six of Crows. He's really the ringleader of the operation. So what is Kaz's wants in the book? At the end of the day, he wants to make a lot of money. They're going on a heist to get, I think it was like 4 million Krug or something crazy. And that is his main goal. It's his motivation. It's his want in life. He wants to make a lot of money. There is another want, which is he wants to get revenge on Pekka Rollins, but that does not ultimately play out in book 1. That becomes more of a bigger want in book 2, even though this is always in the back of our head, right? But I'm just gonna focus on to make a lot of money. At the end of the day, what Kaz really needs is to love people and let them love him, okay? Kaz has a very traumatic past, like most of the characters in Six of Crows, where he lost his brother and he cannot physically touch people due to what happened. So not only can he not physically let people in, but he is so scared to love people and let them love him in return in fear that it will be used against him in their line of work. This is a very common need for a lot of main, strong, tortured, traumatized characters is to just love people and let them love them, So that is where Kaz stands. So does Kaz end up making a lot of money at the end of book 1? No. They kind of fail. They complete their goal of the heist, but they do not get the money, okay? That is a fail. So already we are in the want failed category. Does Kaz get what he needs, which is to love people and let them love him? This is tricky. So in the last couple of chapters, Kaz starts to realize that this is what he needs. And he realizes that he actually loves Inej. He loves her. And he wants to let her in. He tries at one of the last chapters. So we almost think it's going to happen. At the end, when he gets backstabbed by Van Eck, and he makes the grave error of looking at Inej when Van Eck is about to go after his own people, cluing into Van Eck that Inej is what he cares about. Inej is then taken from him. And what does that do? Well, that actually spirals our character of Kaz Brecker absolutely out of control. He is down here. He's so far down. He does not get what he needs and he's pissed about it. So now we are in the need failed category. which means that unfortunately Kaz, our main character, has a bitter ending. And why is that important? It's important because Kaz is almost vindicated in his thoughts of why he should not love people and why he should not let them in, okay? His false belief came to light and he was like, oh, screw this. I am actually going to just become the biggest and baddest thing out there because I don't want anyone to see me falter. He is now worse off than where he was at the beginning of the book. You know, he was starting to maybe think that he could get what he wanted and what he needed, but now he doesn't get both, and he's now becoming worse of a person, which is setting us up for the second book in the series. So now we have Inej Gaffa, or the Wraith. What Inej wants, of course, and this adds and creates tension, is Kaz. She wants the attention of Kaz, the approval of Kaz, and ultimately the love of Kaz Brucker. But what does Inej actually need? In order for Inej to flourish in life, okay, she needs to pay off her debt, right? And get rid of the dregs, like get away from the dregs. But ultimately it comes down to she needs to find purpose outside of Kaz because Kaz is holding her back from this need and ultimately getting that full purpose in her life of getting her own crew on the water and taking down slavers, right? That was her ultimate purpose-filled goal that she realized that she had, but Kaz is in the way because if Kaz is still in the picture and she loves Kaz, she will stay in Kerch and she needs to leave. So she needs to find, I guess I should say, and pursue purpose outside of Kaz. Does she get what she wants? Does she get Kaz's attention, approval, and love? Kind of. So it's ultimately going to be a no, right? They didn't have an ultimate love scene at the very end. Kaz has this expression of love to her, okay? He finally says that I want you. But Inej kind of turns him down. So she does not end up ultimately getting what she originally wanted throughout basically the entire book, was the approval of Kaz that she wasn't just a weapon to him and that she was something more. But she turns him down really in that scene because she did ultimately find out her purpose outside of Kaz. And this was to get her own boat, let's draw a little stick figure boat, and her own little crew, right, to take down slavers and ultimately enact her own purpose and her own revenge. She comes to that conclusion, which allows her to say no to Kaz, okay? So does she get what she wants? No, her want has failed on her own decision, which makes her a very active character, not a passive character. She decided she actually does not want that anymore. But her need was achieved. She found purpose outside of Kaz and her purpose to get out of Kerch. So we have a semi-sweet ending for Inej. Inej ultimately makes the decision for herself to leave Kerch, right? That's absolutely what she wants. And so we are left with this semi-sweet ending to her story. Now, of course, you're probably like, Michaela, she gets kidnapped. How is this not a bitter ending? Well, this is a duology, so it's not the full ending of her story. So when we think of like a duology, I'll just really quickly show like if this is like the structure arc, of course. Book 1 is going to be this portion of the book. Okay, this is book 1, and this would be book 2. So we want to end the book at that midpoint. So really, Inej figures out everything right before that midpoint, and this now is like launching us into the second book. So still, she has a semi-sweet ending coming into book 2, if that makes sense. Nina Zenik is our heartrender, and she wants to make peace with the other character, Matthias. She needs, in her soul, to save Grisha from the Druskill. And these wants and needs are constantly warring within her throughout the entire book. So does she get to make peace with Matthias? Yes, she does. They have a cute little happy ending. Does she actually save Grisha from the Druskill? She does. She does end up saving Grisha from the Druskill by taking an ultimate act of selflessness. Her want was achieved and her need was achieved, which means that, believe it or not, some of you might be shocked, is that Nina Zenik gets a sweet ending. I know, but it's true. And I'm going to explain why and why Lee probably did this the way she did this. So Nina does get what she wants and needs, right? But it comes at a price. Nina was selfless by taking Yurda Parem and exposing herself to the addictive properties of the drug, okay? So we are unsure of what's going to happen to her heading into book 2. And again, you're probably like, how in the heck does Nina have a sweet ending? Again, if we're thinking of this as a 2-part series, which it is, we're at the midpoint at the end of book 1. But here, Nina does get what she wants and needs. Her wants and needs are going to shift, just like Inej's will, going into book 2. All of these characters' wants and needs will shift because a new outcome will have to happen. But why I think also Lee did this is because in this world of the Grishaverse, sometimes these selfless acts don't bode well. I mean, even if we think back to the Shadow and Bone trilogy of what happens to Sancta Elena, it's not all positive, right? She loses her power. Nina did this selfless act, and now she is in a lesser place because of it. So even though she got her want and her need, Nina is kind of the example for our main character. Our main character is still Kaz, but Nina's kind of the example for him that you should not, again, go after love. Nina is kind of this foil character to showing Kaz in a different way that going after love is so bad, because she did that with Matthias and she did that to save the Grisha, and look where she ended up, in a bad place. Even though she ultimately had a sweet ending and she was changed for the better right at the end of it. And that's what we're looking at. And for sake of time, I'm just going to quickly do Matthias Helvar and Jesper Fahey. So Matthias's want is to kill Nina and get back to the Druskill. And his needs are to overcome his internalized prejudices. So his want failed. He did not kill Nina and he did not join the Druskill. He loves Nina and he chose the Six of Crows. But his need was achieved. He does overcome his prejudices, as we can see for the most part, to give him a semi-sweet ending. Jesper, he also has two wants that kind of war between him the entire book, is to pay off his debts and also to gamble away all of his money, okay? But he needs to not conceal his identity anymore. His identity as a Grisha, as a fabricator, and his sexual identity as well. So does he get what he wants? No. He does not get a ton of money, so does not pay off his debts, nor does he get to gamble with them, so both wants are failed. But his need is achieved. He does showcase his Grisha powers. He becomes more intrigued about them as the book goes on, and he is more open about his sexuality because, of course, he has a little crush on Wylan. So Jesper has also a semi-sweet ending. So if we're keeping score, we have Kaz Brecker in the bitter ending. We have Inej in the semi-sweet ending, Nina in the sweet ending, and then Matthias and Jesper also in the semi-sweet ending. The main reason why Kaz is in the bitter ending is because he's in our main character, and this is going to project him forward into the motions for the second book. Whereas the rest of our characters, even though yes, we have POVs of all of them, Kaz is still our main character. All of these wants and needs in these character arcs are kind of like wrapped up neatly with a bow. They either achieve it or they don't. And now, moving into book 2, we'll see if they have new wants and new needs. Whereas Kaz's wants and needs actually do not change. But we will see, does he end up still as a bitter ending or somewhere else in the books? That's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. That was a long video. I drank like 2 of these recording that because whenever I do voiceovers, I just get so parched. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned something. And if you didn't learn something, maybe you at least enjoyed it. I know I love listening to people talk about writing craft, and even if it's things I knew before, I just love hearing other people's takes on it. If you haven't read Six of Crows and you had to skip that spoilery part and came to the end, then go read it. The Grishaverse is so great, and it's really good books to study from. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, all the YouTubey things. And I will see you next time for, I think, my first writing update on Project House of Stone, where I'm trying to write my 0 draft in 60 days. If you did like this video and you love writing craft as much as I do have a 2-part story structure masterclass where I break down the story structure of the first book in the Shadow and Bone series. So go check that out if you haven't already. But that's all for me. I am done talking probably for the rest of the day, and I hope you have a great day. And whatever you do, keep on writing. Bye, writers.